So good
Hello,
morning.
this is Karl Susman here with my good friend Debbie Bremner this beautiful Friday morning. How are you this morning, Debbie?
I'm very good. Things are really good in the real estate market, so I'm happy to be here and happy to be sharing information today.
You betcha. Sorry we've had a little hiatus for a couple of weeks there, but I guess it's a good thing when you're so busy you can't coordinate schedules, and I'm happy to be in that position as well. We were
That's right.
just chit-chatting about something that was current in the news, and I think some very important news for people to be aware of as property owners. Why don't you go ahead and give me that spiel again while I have my first delicious sip of my freshly Starbucks iced latte that just made its way to my desk. Thank you so much. Okay.
We'll say that his assistant did not bring one for me, so that's okay.
I will let her
That's
know.
okay. So, not as we know, all real estate is local, and what's happening locally in Los Angeles is we're struggling valiantly to survive budget cuts and survive what's going on. And one of the most recent things that happened coincided with a neighborhood event that I'd like to talk about. So, yesterday in the news, there were two interesting things that sort of dovetailed into each other. The first was a very sad incident in Mar Vista, which, for those of you that don't know Los Angeles, we'll just call it West Los Angeles on the beach side. And what's interesting about this incident in Mar Vista was there was a dog that had been cited multiple times for being a neighborhood nuisance, and that was about barking and being threatening to neighbors walking by on the sidewalk. But
Just to clarify, because it sounds funny, you say the dog was cited. They obviously they go and
yeah,
they make a. Well, I'm just saying you could get the impression that maybe they leave a note or something, but this is actually a formal written process that the owners of the animal will receive that says, look, there have been complaints, there's concerns about your animal, do something about it. So it's a very formal process. It's not something that can be, oh, I didn't know anyone was complaining. I mean, if you get a notice on your animal being a nuisance, you definitely do know about it.
right. And it is a serious thing. I'm not making light of this in any way, shape, or form, because generally when it gets to that point, it's not just neighbors talking over their fence saying, "Oh my God, did you hear the neighbor's dog barking last night?" It's, look, we're putting our neighborhood at risk by having this dog in the area, and can you talk to the owner? So the owner had been notified multiple times about this dog, and yesterday, somehow, I don't know the details of this, but the dog did get loose as a woman was walking by, walking her own dog. Now, her dog is much smaller and was gotten by the throat by this dog. And in the woman's attempt to free and extricate her dog from the jaws of this neighborhood nuisance dog, her arm was severely bitten as well by the dog. So it was an attack of the dog to the dog and the owner. And so immediately the dog was confiscated and taken away. And the littler dog went into surgery and looks like it's going to be okay. And of course, the woman went to the emergency room and she looks like she's going to be okay. But as we all know from these situations, it could have gone much worse. At the same time, yesterday afternoon, we have a new head of animal regulation who just took her place yesterday, and we have these tremendous issues with overcrowding in our animal shelters because people are not taking care of their animals. They're letting them run free. They're not licensed. The dogs and cats are obviously procreating at rapid numbers, and all of those unwanted, unneeded animals are going to the shelters, being cared for, but then being euthanized because people can't adopt. There's a limit in the city of Los Angeles that you can have either three cats or three dogs, but three pets is the limit of what they'll license for you. And so, interestingly enough, because they're trying to do something about how much they're spending on the shelters, they'd like to raise the limit in Los Angeles to homeowners being allowed to have five animals at one time. And it's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're taking the problem out of the shelters and putting it back in the neighborhoods. And already the irresponsible pet owners are having as many animals as they want. So this, we're seeing that the problem is just being put into the neighborhood. Where I was asking Karl before all of you jumped on this recording, what does that mean for neighborhood liability for the city, for the individual homeowner? And Karl said he has some information for us about that. So I'd like to discuss this topic.
I just smile because you always manage to put these things so perfectly politically correctly about how, and of course, the animals are procreating and at their normal rates. And I think you just have just such the perfect way of putting these things just so politically correctly. Well, what's interesting about this is, animal liability with homeowners has always been an issue because, everyone
Yeah.
has, oh, my pit bull doesn't bite. Oh, my pit bull is the most friendly there is. Oh, my Rottweiler would lick your face, as an appetizer, maybe. No. And so, animal liability is something that dog liability specifically, we might as well say it since we're talking about that, is an issue that we hear about in the insurance industry continually. What's interesting is there's people have sort of a false sense of security that they think that if their dog is safe and their dog doesn't bite, that they're basically curbing their liability. Let me give you an example. Let's say I don't even own a pet, I don't have a dog. You're walking your dog down the street. Let's say even with this example you gave, and another animal or another person comes by, and your dog bites someone else while on my property. Because you're on my property, I now have animal liability. And
Oh,
yes, and my property insurance policy would have to respond to that as well. So
oh,
there's
I
actually,
didn't know that.
yeah, I knew I'd get that look from you. There's
Well,
actually been a handful of insurance companies that have tried to, I don't want to say weasel out, but try and avoid that liability by asking people to save a few dollars on their policy and have them sign an animal liability exclusion. Well, what people were doing was they're saying, oh, well, I don't even own a pet, so I might as well do it. Well, we had to do a little bit of educating. Is that just because you don't own a pet, it doesn't mean that you don't have an animal liability exposure. You do.
so to be clear, then, there's a mom in a stroller walking down the street, and the mom stops in front of my house on the sidewalk, which, by the way, the city of Los
That's right.
Angeles is trying to give back to me right now. And she's sitting and adjusting the baby in the stroller, giving the pacifier or whatever. And another person comes by walking down the street with their dog, and their dog attacks her baby at my house. I'm liable for the actions of that pet and
You
any damages to.
you are. You are. And the problem is from a consumer standpoint is that people are assuming that if they don't have a pet, they don't need animal liability. If they have a friendly pet, they don't need animal liability, where it really has nothing to do with any of that. It has to
Oh
do with
my gosh.
yeah.
You're
And
right. This is an aha moment
this
for
is an
me. I
aha
never
moment. Yeah.
did this,
So
and I've never been able to tell my clients this.
yeah.
This is a very interesting piece of information. Thank you.
Fortunately, what's interesting about it is that it's one of those things that you want to be sure that you're clear on when you're looking to obtain any type of property insurance, that you do have animal liability. And don't think or don't assume that just because you don't have an animal, or again, you have the friendly pit bull, that you're okay, you don't need to worry about it, because you do. You still have that exposure based on what your neighbor has. Back to the original point of the story we started. Now we're going to say, and I think it's relatively safe to bet that this new legislation is going to pass. We're going to go from having 3 pets
Yeah.
to 5 pets. Well, that's a lot more animals. That's a lot more doggies running around that could potentially be causing havoc. Now, mind you, I'm an animal lover. I love dogs. I mean, I've grown up with dogs. I mean, I'm big on that, so I'm not being anti-animal. The problem with this particular legislation, in my mind, is people that already have more than 3 pets already have 3 pets. I don't think that there's a single family out there that says, oh, I have my 3 pet maximum. I would so go and adopt another 2 if only it was legal. I mean,
Right.
it sounds ridiculous even.
Well,
So
there's a sliver of the animal lover world who are animal activists who will go and adopt an extra two and and sort of be
you
the
think?
interim housing for those to save them from euthanizing the animal. But that's a sliver of the place. I mean, most families do not have 5 or 6 or 7 pets, at least in the area that I'm working. That's not an issue. So I think this is just, again, a way to rob Peter to pay Paul. This is a way to.
I don't see it. I don't see it accomplishing much of anything, frankly. And I think again, I think it's a very short-sighted way to try and like you're saying, save money. Maybe. I mean, again, I mean, you're maybe I'm just not as I'm not as much as a believer. I don't see. I think people that would go and adopt extra animals are already doing it. You know,
Yeah.
if I had enough space and I and that was my thing to be animal rescue, then I wouldn't be terribly concerned about having 3 or 4 or 5. I would just do that. I mean, I'm not worried about people knocking down my door and saying I think I heard a fourth bark behind the gate there. So I just can't see what this is going to accomplish at all, except again, uh, potentially have just more animals running around, and
Well, the
it's
upshot of this conversation for me is to sit with my clients and say, it's time for us to again talk to you about going back to go back to Karl and overlook your policy and see where you stand on this one issue, because this is something that you really need to protect yourself. You know, the area that I work is an extremely high property value area, and these people could have very deep pockets. And something like this, if this became a lawsuit, would be very, very expensive,
sure,
very expensive.
sure,
So it's time to shift the liability back. That's a piece of insurance worth having, I think.
for
I'm
sure.
I'm shocked at this. I really didn't know this. So you've educated me once again.
Oh, well, it's always my pleasure to do so. It's a challenge too because it's hard to find things that you're not clear on.
Yeah.
This is one of
Well,
those things. Well,
it's a little tiny thing. It's a little tiny piece of the puzzle, but it's a big piece because people do, walk their dogs, and dogs get out of yards, and it happens. It just
mhm,
happens.
absolutely. Well, if you have any other questions on this, or if you want to touch on this in more detail, we can certainly do that again. We can certainly do it again next week or so. I'm also going to give a shout out to anyone out there that's in the legal profession if they want to give an opinion on this, or if they've had any firsthand knowledge of lawsuits that may have developed in this area to sort of give us some feedback on how that works. We'll try and keep the insurance company names out of it. But again, I can say from personal experience that this is something that we've already dealt with. So it's definitely out there and something to be aware of.
And as you can see, Carl and I are always interested in the little tidbits that are happening in each of the neighborhoods that we serve. So if you want to talk a little bit more about your specific neighborhood, please call us. We're happy to help. Our contact information will be linked to this, and we'd love to hear your questions and your experiences in your little local neighborhood.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again for watching, and we will hopefully talk to you again same time next week.
We will see you next Friday, and we'll
Exactly.
probably have coffee, and I probably won't.
Oh, we'll have to make sure you have coffee somehow. All right.
Okay.